Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you are here. Welcome to this new moon forecast. We're going to go over the main astrological themes for the next 2 weeks. It is the 18th of March, 2026. Welcome and welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate all of you so much. So before we get into all of the ins and outs of this new moon and what to expect over this next 2 weeks, I have a question for you all. Anybody else feel deeply, existentially just exhausted? So tired. Now, it could be lucky for us here in Pennsylvania, throughout the tri-state area, I would imagine, maybe even a little bit further north than New York and further south than New Jersey, maybe even to Delaware and Maryland. I'm not entirely sure. But, we're so close to the equinox, the beginning of spring. And it's always such a contrast here in Pennsylvania at this time. So 2 days ago, it was 65 degrees and storming, and now there's snow on the ground and it's barely pushing 25 degrees outside, hence the beanie and the vest. Not that I need an excuse to wear a beanie. It seems to be something that is part of my skin suit at this point, but that could also be part of the existentially tired, just tired to the bone. But I suspect that if you're not exposed to this rapid, contrasting weather change, it's still something that many of us can probably relate to just on a deeper level. So we're going to talk a little bit about the space weather, the Schumann, what to expect over the next couple days in terms of solar activity, and then we're just going to launch right into this new moon forecast. So today is the 18th, as I said, of March, and the new moon is exact this evening, 9:23 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we got roughly about 11 hours till the new moon is exact, which means we're still technically in our balsamic moon phase. So that's another reason to feel this deep and in some cases, it might even be this overwhelming sense to really just draw ourselves in, to be very still. Maybe we just want to wrap ourselves in our own introversion or solitude right now and be very still. In fact, I definitely feel like the logical part of my mind, my thinking mind, is definitely having a hard time firing right now, which makes being able to do these transmissions a little difficult, at least in terms of the left brain part of astrology, because as much as I prepare, things are not necessarily connecting. But for anybody who does any type of intuitive work as a profession, or even just a very dedicated hobby, that's exactly the best time for intuitive insight to really present itself very clearly, is when you get your monkey mind out of the way. So as tired, as deeply tired as I feel right now with the balsamic moon, with the state of the weather here in Pennsylvania, I also kind of welcome the exhaustion just turning my brain down a little bit. It's not exactly a terrible thing when you live with the constant movement and the constant spinning of thoughts. It's great when you're ready to crank out ideas and synthesize things, but when you're really trying to just be calm and grounded, sometimes it's a real distraction. So this is why meditation is such an important practice for people who have such a strong mental acuity, and why will be a lifelong practice, right? There's never a moment where it's like, oh yeah, I sit down and it all empties every day, without any effort. Maybe that'll happen at the end of my life, but I seriously doubt it. So I'm really feeling the dark side of the moon vibes today as well. That has a lot to do with the fact that whenever I now have the image of light moving through a prism, I certainly think of that album cover. But even the energy of that entire album seems really relevant right now. And I think maybe I'll listen to that in its entirety today, just to kind of tap into that energy. Now, the reason I picked that imagery for the thumbnail and just the general symbol of today's forecast and for the new moon in general is because the Sabian symbol of 28 to 29 degrees, which is where this new moon is in Western or tropical astrology, is a light breaking through a prism. And it really brings up this concept and this reality that there's only a moment where unity is, and it's not even a moment. I mean, you can't even attach it to something like time. It's a 0 point. It's just this weightless moment of unity, and then everything differentiates back into their different frequencies and wavelengths, just like when light moves through a prism. So when white light moves through a substance that is considered a prism, water is a really good example, which is why we get rainbows. It refracts the light because of the change in density of that substance, right? So the idea is that water is more dense than the gaseous atmosphere. And we see all the differentiation of visible white light, all the different wavelengths, right? Because each color represents or is indicative of a different frequency that light is oscillating in. And so we see different colors based on the frequency and wavelength. And you know, we're finally coming out of this eclipse, and this has been the longest month of it seems like the longest month of my life, just getting through this entire eclipse window, because so much has happened within these weeks of the eclipse and the Chinese New Year, and we're right on the heels of the equinox. In fact, you know, on the 20th is when the sun moves into 0 degrees Aries, and you know, technically spring here in the northern hemisphere. We have moving into autumn in the southern hemisphere, right? We're, again, a 0 point moment where there is balance. But there is only balance when we acknowledge that there are two sides to be balanced. And the theme of contrast continues to come up over and over in the personal readings, in the membership readings, in just the astrology in general, that without the contrast, without the opportunity to have an opposing side to something, we don't truly have perspective. And we certainly don't have the opportunity to balance or achieve balance or experience balance. So there's still a lot of that energy that is part of the astrology right now, and certainly to come. And specifically because this new moon, not only is it these last degrees of Pisces, which is always a very powerful, any of the late degrees is always a powerful, kind of masterful position in any of the zodiac signs. It's in a sextile to our friend Uranus, right? Which is now moved into also the 29-degree area of Taurus, which in Sabian symbol language is two cobblers, right? Was a cobbler somebody who fixes and repairs shoes, right? The shoes, the things that we wear on our feet that ground us and that we stand on. Two cobblers working side by side at a table. So not only are they working together, but they're also working on a piece of clothing or an object that we identify as having two opposing but equal positions, right? You have a left foot and a right foot, so you have a left shoe and a right shoe, presumably, right? Not everybody has both feet. If you are disabled in any way, then obviously this doesn't apply to you, but it's more symbolic, obviously. So Uranus, being the agent of change, usually change we don't necessarily predict or anticipate, or in a lot of cases even welcome. This position now that it is in, this degree of Taurus, really represents, because we're getting close to the sign that represents the dichotomy, which is Gemini. So we're moving into this period of time when Uranus will, later this year, when not even that long, right? May into June, when Uranus moves into Gemini. So we're getting to a point where We're going to have rapid change and upgrades, if you want to call them that, when it comes to Uranus, right? The wormhole opening, right? The Stargate activating, however you want to conceptualize this for yourself, whatever language makes sense to you, whatever images symbolically really resonate with you. Uranus is that trigger point, right? That opens everything up. It tips it on its side so that you have a different perspective. There is no mature understanding or perspective without taking into account the total opposite of something. And Uranus is going to make sure that we have that flipped script in order to truly understand something and have a mature perspective. So the fact that this is in a sextile, a very harmonious connection to the new moon, so both the sun and the moon, right, because they are conjunct, that's what makes a new moon. Speaking of dark side, total aside, but not really, that's what we'll be seeing is the dark side of the moon when a new moon happens, because the moon is in between us and the sun, and so the sun is shining on the back side of the moon. We're seeing no moon, but really what we're seeing is the dark side of the moon. The fact that this is in a sextile to Uranus, yes, it will be exact with the sun, and it'll have something for us in more of an immediate, but just keep in mind that new moons, they are seeds that we plant, right? Of growth and learning and relationship and discovery about ourselves and our place in the world. That develops over the course of a lunar cycle. And now that we're out of the eclipse window, we're going to be back to more surface level, if you want to call it that, lunar progressions or cycles. And so throughout the next couple of weeks, through this lunar cycle, it is going to have the energy of this Uranian connection along with it and coloring it and being something that we can actually activate for ourselves if we choose to do so. That's the thing about a sextile, right? It is harmonious and it provides opportunity for us to transform internally, but it also means we have to participate. And so keep in mind when you think about that degree that Uranus is in, right? They are, in fact, working, those two cobblers. They're not just sitting there. They're not taking a smoke break. They're not chatting about whatever. They're not sleeping on the job. They are working. And when you have something like a prism, for instance, and you realize that, this white light that we see and is, pretty much everything in terms of our visual world will differentiate into their own unique wavelengths and frequencies, we have a type of discernment or judgment that is incredibly accurate if we are able to see it for what it is. But it will require that we actually put some effort into it over this next couple of weeks. So, of course, when we come to the full moon, which will be in Libra, right? Because the sun will be in Aries by that point, April 1st. April 1st, the full moon will be that moment of culmination and full vision, right? The culmination of our purpose. But for now, over the next 2 weeks, there's still a lot going on that maybe we don't have the full view right now. But there will be plenty of things here that are going to trigger us into working and moving and reacting and responding to the things that start to present themselves, as is the case with every first half of a lunar cycle. So before we get into the charts, I just want to start bringing up some space weather here. So I'm going to share the screen just to kind of get us oriented. Now, something to consider is that at the equinox time, there is something called the Russell-McPherson effect. And basically what it represents is, so I'm going to bring up a view of the sun here. Just so you can, let's see here. There we go. And we're going to talk about what we're looking at here in a second. But the Russell-McPherson effect, if you're not familiar with it, it basically is an effect at the equinox time that there are cracks in the magnetic field more so than at other times of the year, and we have more possibility of auroras. So there's actually a really good possibility at the equinox, which is in 2 days from now. So today's Wednesday the 18th. So by the weekend, there is a heightened possibility of auroras in a much deeper south in terms of, lower latitudes, basically. And that's because, number one, we've had 2 solar flares in the last 2 or 3 days that have projected CMEs, coronal mass ejections. So we're going to get solar wind because of that, and enhanced solar activity because of 2 CMEs that are coming our way. Plus, we have this coronal hole on the left, and for some reason, this coronal hole is not being mentioned whatsoever by spaceweather.com, officially. I don't know why, because this should be hitting us pretty much right now. It's facing towards us, so we'll be getting the solar wind from this one momentarily, and then into the weekend we're going to get the solar wind. So that's 4 different impacts that we're likely to get in the next couple of days. And then with the Russell-McPherson effect of the equinoxes, there is more vulnerability, basically. And of course, with the magnetic field weakening, there's more vulnerability anyway, so we might get an aurora show, and that also is indicative of the possibility that there may be, heightened risk with all kinds of physical and health issues, as well as mental health issues, right? Because it's all pretty much the same. It's all managed electromagnetically. So I just want to bring this up because this is something to be aware of, so you can get, it's the same reason that you use astrology, right? Get a little bit ahead of the curve, read the room, essentially, and this is on its way. So just keep that in mind, that things are going to get a lot more heightened, that solar weather can, aggravate symptoms, migraines, headaches, inflammation, stroke. I mean, there's definitely lots of research, published research about the connections to cardiovascular health. The risk of strokes and heart attacks goes up at this time, especially people who are already vulnerable. The risk of psychiatric issues become more enhanced and aggravated with this solar wind enhancement and any type of geomagnetic storm conditions. And of course, I walk outside this morning on my walk knowing this is on its way. And of course, the spraying is pretty much right there. I'm not going to bring it up, but I did see on my social media feed that I was glancing at this morning that the Daily Mail, I think it was the Daily Mail, had published an article about evidence. I don't know where they got it. It must be in a document dump somewhere, that that the CIA has been cloud seeding. Oh wow, big shocker, right? But the evidence is starting to present itself. So even that whole conversation that people may have labeled you as the dreaded conspiracy theorist or a wacko about spraying in the sky, it's eventually going to come to pass. So, and they've been talking about weather modification and cloud seeding for decades, if not longer, pretty openly. Adam, if you're listening, I have never forgotten, since you showed it to me, that clip from, if you remember the old Garfield cartoon back in the 90s. There was, you sent me this whole thing, this whole clip from one of the episodes where they're basically educating their viewing audience, which is children, about cloud seeding and how it works and stuff. So it's not like they've been hiding it. It's just that nobody's been really paying attention, except for the people who are paying attention and are directly affected by things like cloud seeding and all of the chemicals that go along with it. So I don't know. Let's see what YouTube has to say about my conversation around this. But anyway, the spraying was pretty evident. So God forbid we get any solar codes with any of this enhanced solar activity. It's uncomfortable, but sometimes that's exactly what's needed in order to, bring some stuff up and out. So that's the sun. And what I also want to share real quick is the Schumann has just been relentless. I mean, I think most of us at this point, if we're paying attention to something like the Schumann resonance, I mean, this sonogram right this moment doesn't necessarily give the full picture, but it has been very consistent with these white patches. And there has been some uptick in seismic activity. That's definitely happening as well. There haven't been any huge quakes in the last couple of days, but I would say that they're probably going to be with all of this enhanced solar wind and solar weather and the Russell McPherson effect, because seismic activity it's an electrical component that is responsible for that. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see some uptick in the severity and magnitude of seismic activity, but the Schumann has just been relentless. Like every other day, it's just a huge blast, a huge blast. In this case, it was long duration. This one is a little bit less of a long duration and more of a quick spike in the amplitude, but it's pretty consistent. So again, that might also be part of where the existential exhaustion is coming from, because we're just getting hit over and over. And that might be part of the process right now in terms of what we are walking into and moving through right now. There is so much, and people are really finding themselves being consumed by what they are viewing out there. And even what is happening in our own personal lives can be very disruptive, can be very confusing and exhausting as well. And so we're getting it from all sides, right? And so the Schumann is just another example right now that it's just been relentless. So if you are feeling these things, know that there are actual electromagnetic connections to why this is happening, and also to whatever it is that you are finding yourself consuming. Social media and just regular media wise is certainly adding to this. And I see that out in my own personal orbit. A few of you have told me personally, not in person, but you know what I mean, through personal contact. A number of people, especially people in Catalyst membership, actually, which says a lot about people who are making the commitment to their own progress, their own spiritual journey, their progression, their own growth. Many people are going on social media fasts entirely. You know, they're not really engaging. They're not really watching a lot of content. They're not, scrolling and getting involved in what's going on at that level. And I would say that if you need to reserve your energy, that might be a good way to do it, because, you just pretty much give so much of yourself away when you, not even just time, but, getting involved in the constant back and forth of the social media realm. So, okay. These are all the space weather, more materialistic electromagnetic things that I want to share, because it's all pretty much the same, when it comes down to it, it all comes from the same place. But I wanted to share those things, and also too, to give us a little bit of a heads up, like things are about to get crazier. So, and there's astrological reasons for that too. So I'm going to stop the share here, and we're going to get into the chart. So the astrology site that I usually use, which allows for me to just, click through at different intervals of time, has been completely overrun by bots. And so they're doing like major server maintenance. So I can't use it. So what I'm going to do is just show you two charts, one for the new moon, and then ahead for the first quarter moon, because it'll give me what I need to communicate to you what's going on and give you a visual representation, okay, which is through astro.com, which I actually recommend that if you are interested in astrology beyond just listening to these videos and getting this insight and actually like practicing for yourself, astro.com is the way to go. And that's what I use for all of my clients. I have a paid subscription, and it allows me to, save like thousands of charts. So, but that's the chart I'm going to use too. They have a really cool feature that, let me see if I can show it to you, that you can use chart of the moment. And you probably are familiar with that if you go to astro.com. Oh, that's not what I wanted, but that's okay. Let's see here. So I'm going to show you the actual chart, but if you went back to astro.com, oh, this tab right here, you can see it says sun, moon, and then there's a little Mercury glyph. If you were to press that and then go down chart of the moment, it shows you in its own window, based on, your birth chart and your birth city, or whatever city you input, it'll give you the actual chart of the moment and all the parameters that you want to use. So anyway, that's just a little bit of like logistics about how to use this. And so let's get into the chart for, no, that's not what I want. Yes, here we go. This is the chart for the Pisces new moons today, March 18th, 2026. Let me just bring this down a little bit so you can see the whole thing. Okay. I wanted to share this tab instead. Here we go. Sorry. There we go. So it is a Libra chart, just because when I cast it for the time of the new moon in the place that I'm in, which is Williamsport, Pennsylvania, this is the ascendant at that time. So if you're a Libra rising, and there's one person in particular that I'm thinking of that is a Libra rising, fairly close to this degree actually, then yay for you. You kind of get a little bit of a horoscope for this new moon, because everything will be in the houses that are relevant to your chart. So, and then when we look at the first quarter moon chart, it'll be for a different ascendant because it's different date, different time. It's just to give you a visual of the aspects, right? And as you can see, there's a lot of Pisces still, and two asteroids, asteroid Vesta and Pallas Athena. Vesta, or Hestia, is the hearth flame, right? It represents the flame of our devotion. And then Pallas Athena, that is the goddess of wisdom and strategy. They're also in Pisces right now. So we are definitely overloaded in Pisces. So if you are in those 25 degrees and beyond of any of the mutable signs, so Gemini, Virgo, Sag, or Pisces, this new moon is going to hit you especially hard, and you yourself may be feeling even more tired and kind of like sublime, if that makes sense, with this new moon coming, because number one, those are all mutable signs. So there's malleability, there's changeability, there is an ability to be flexible and to change, but also too, because of that, it is more difficult to either maintain momentum or to fix yourself into any position or point. And so it's really easy to just go with the flow. And with Pisces, I mean, we definitely just sometimes can feel like we just want to surrender, right? Which is not a terrible thing. And the Hanged Man has been coming out in several readings recently, and I definitely saw it in a different person's reading not that long ago within this week. So there is a lot of that dissolving boundaries here and just surrendering to the flow of what is, which if you're locked into fear, if you're locked into anger, if you are finding yourself just like drowning in the negativity of what you are seeing out in the world, well, I mean, you're just being taken over. You are, in fact, drowning in all of it. And I definitely see that in people around me. And so it's very difficult with Pisces to establish yourself and a sense of identity. Now, that's, there are other things that are going to support us reestablishing that sense of identity, not the least of which is that the sun is about to come into Aries, which it is exalted in, right? The sun loves to be in Aries. It's familiar with a fire sign. It's going to wake us all up to a certain extent, right? That we become identified and sustained by all of the potential and desire of what we can be, right? And of course, we have Saturn and we have Neptune here in Aries, and we have Venus in Aries, which, she's kind of spicy, not even kind of, in Aries. But when she gets to the last 10 degrees, as she is moving into her home territory of Taurus, which will happen before we get to the full moon, that will be on probably the 30th or 31st, that last 10 degrees of Aries for Venus is related to the Four of Wands. And there is a sense of creative completion and celebration when that happens. So just hold fast, guys. It's coming. There is a sense of rebirth and renewal, as we always always get with the equinox time, but Venus too, representing, that which we value within ourselves, within the world around us, what leads to a sense of security and comfort and style and beauty and relationship, whatever meaning, there's going to be a sense of completion and celebration that is on its way with Venus coming into those last 10 degrees of Aries. So, if you are feeling really tired, if you're feeling like you just kind of want to like sink down to the bottom, so to speak, or wrap yourself in your own introversion right now, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, again, it's important to have those moments of stillness, right? And to allow your brain to kind of turn off a little bit. Now, you don't want to overdo it, because we actually just had a square, as you can see here, with Venus and Jupiter that happened probably about, 12 to 10 hours ago, right? Like right as the day flipped over Eastern Standard Time, like towards midnight or whatever. So Venus in a square to Jupiter often, just in general, will lead to a type of indulgence, right? We tend to overcompensate when these two are in a square, because Venus really likes to indulge herself and represents that part of ourselves. And Jupiter, especially in Cancer, now that it is direct, really likes to expand. So a lot of times there will be an overindulgence in the areas that you find these two in when they're in a square to each other. And I want to look at some of my notes here. It's a very dynamic tension. It's impulsive and independent desires, right, with Venus in Aries. And then you have Jupiter that is expanding this need for emotional security and nurturing, right? So it can really, like I said, trigger that excessive indulgence or overspending in pursuit of pleasure, right? Because that's what Venus does, or what it represents, I should say. But there's opportunities through growth, and it's about balancing these things. So here, right away, just the tension of these two is providing an opportunity to balance. Bold and fiery position of Venus. Now, remember, this is the Princess of Wands here, right? She just burn it all down as she, just blazes through based on purely feeling, and not like emotional feeling, like sensory feeling. She just, she's just off playing, and in the process burns it all down in her wake, right? And so this is about balancing, because the thing is, if we can be attuned to the potency of like the natural forces around us, which is what Venus at 16 degrees Aries represents, but if we go overboard, then we miss the opportunity to integrate that part of ourselves into a larger whole, which is where Jupiter is sitting right now, right? Integrating the personality into the things that have changed, or the new situation that we find ourselves in. Because Cancer, for all of its, about feelings and deep moodiness that it represents, we also need to integrate that root system into the world around us, right? And so we can't necessarily just forget about that. And that's why this square, I think, has been really important to kind of set that tone. First sense of like balance here, balancing that all out, right? We can't give up on ourselves either. And that bold, fiery action that Venus in Aries represents. So, avoiding impulsive commitments and things, or making hasty decisions based on emotional cravings, right? And again, we want to kind of soothe ourselves with something like this, and we may find that we do some damage in the process, and then have to go back and do cleanup. And this is saying, maybe you don't want to do that. Try to blend the need for, your excitement, or to feel soothed in some way for, with the need for long-term comfort and security. Because you don't want to also give up on yourself and those personal individual needs and desires for that long-term comfort and security. Because we all know where that goes, right? You don't go anywhere actually. You just stay stagnant where you are and don't ever reach for more or take that risk, right? There's a difference between making hasty decisions and acting on spontaneity. And this type of square can really put us in a position to be like, okay, is that what this is? You know, is it a hasty decision or impulsive commitments, or am I actually acting on my real desire and independent desire? And how is this going to affect my emotional security or nurturing? So we all have something that we're working with, right, with that type of square. So you can see that square. And something to keep in mind, too, is that Venus is now entering the territory of the Andromeda constellation. So Andromeda starseeds, things are going to become very visceral with Venus involved. You know, they're going to get right to the things that matter to you most. And so that's just something that we would call a starseed or galactic activation. And of course, Jupiter has just been sitting right there with the star Sirius this whole time. And so that is something that Sirian starseeds have been, you know, this is more of a longer term thing that's been going on, because this is where Jupiter's stationed direct. And so it's been sitting here for weeks, and in some cases not doing anything until it's stationed direct, and now it's slowly expanding again. And so that's an ongoing thing. For those of us who have that Sirian starseed connection, that's been an ongoing process. Now, and also just to circle back to that, the lunar eclipse in Virgo was in a sextile to Jupiter, and so those were big starseed activations as well. So, but we're past the eclipse now, right? We're out of that window, and it's like more than a hangover. It was exhausting, the things that came up and were presented, and will come to some measure of external, maybe not fruition, but they will be externalized come July. And into August. Like, there's just no doubt about that. How it's going to look, who knows, right? I mean, we can certainly forecast things based on how we feel and what we're seeing in the temporal map, but, the mystery is something to value as far as I'm concerned. And, I mean, you get a lot of that in the sign of Cancer, strangely enough. So, because it's deep. It's very deep. It's the realm of the high priestess, right? And that is all mystery. And the what is going on under the surface and in the void. So let's talk about this new moon. I want to give you a little bit more insight on the energy of 28 to 29 degrees Pisces, which is a light breaking into many colors as it passes through a prism. So one thing that it represents is the analytical power of the mind. And not only that, but the power that is necessary to formulate life processes in their many aspects. Now, this is coming directly from Dane Rudyard in the astrological mandala. One of my main astrological influences and quote-unquote teachers. Like, I didn't learn from him directly, but I feel like that I download a lot from him, and I don't use that word very lightly, but that is something that I feel like I have. So I really recommend the book. It was out of print, and I think it's gone back into print, because you can find paperback copies of the astrological mandala for not $300 anymore. So maybe somebody realized there was money to be made by reprinting it. You can always find it on Internet Archive as well. And you can find the original Sabian symbol by Mark Edmund Jones. You can easily get that on Kindle. And those are two different perspectives. Like, their interpretation of this is kind of different. So, but I really appreciate the Dane Rudyard interpretation. So that's what we're going with today. So the inevitability of future process of differentiation is implied. The idea here that no matter what, unity will always break into multiplicity, right? And so there is a moment of balance no matter what. There's always that 0 point. But from there, it spreads out or moves in varying directions. Just like when the white light goes through the prism and is refracted, you see all of the different colors and their various frequencies and wavelengths. So the only thing that is absolute what this symbol represents is that the only thing that is absolute is the relationship between the one and the many, right? Between us and Creator, right? Life and the beginning of life. Existence implies differentiation, right? And the fact that this is in a sextile to Uranus at that degree I just talked about with the two cobblers, right? That you need this differentiation in order to truly understand something, this twofold character of mature understanding really suggests to me that we're gonna get put through that differentiation in order to develop that really masterful analytical power, so that we always understand and put any situation through this process. It's like putting anything through the refractory mechanism of a prism so that you can see all of the different elements that are involved. So it's impossible to fully understand anything when it's opposite, except when its opposite isn't taken into consideration. And the sign that really understands this, and I swear this is not just a bias, is Sagittarius, another mutable sign, right? Sagittarius is about the synthesis of opposition. That is what alchemy really is. That is what a catalyzing energy, changing two things that come together, and the friction between them catalyzes a reaction and creates something new. And so, but before you can even get to that point, you have to have two equal but opposing sides, which is Gemini. So we're getting close to Gemini with Uranus, and it is really setting this new moon is really setting the stage for us to develop this analytical power to really differentiate between all of the different aspects of life, with the understanding that it all comes from one, right? But that one, or that unity, is not the consistent reality all the time, at least here in this dimension, right? Well, operate in different realms, and that's going to be different. Existence implies differentiation. So this is about judging things with incredible accuracy, because not only are you seeing a thing for what it is, the white light, you can differentiate all of the frequencies of that white light and how it presents to the world, right? Just like the light goes through the prism and you get the rainbow. You see all the different variations. Doesn't mean it's any less than the white light. And that's something that's really going to be needed, I think, moving forward, is this capacity to see all the differentiation and know that it all comes back to one singular consciousness, right? Because that's how we're actually going to all get along. But as long as we stay in our factions, then we are, kind of doomed, basically. So this new moon is really setting up, and I don't know how it's going to manifest. It's going to be different for everybody, and it's going to be different depending on where you are, too. Now, that's the new moon energy. And of course, a new moon in a sextile to Uranus, I mean, this is very practical, tangible, innovative results, kind of grounding that dreamy and imaginative aspect of a Pisces new moon, right? I mean, creative breakthroughs galore, encouraging you to shake up stale habits, for something more authentic, more stable, more fulfilling. So, I mean, there is definitely something to look forward to here as we move into the next season, which is the equinox. So when we get to that point, besides the fact that it's the equinox, what we're also going to see here is that Mercury in Pisces, it's just past the North Node. It's going to station direct pretty much on top of it and then come back and meet it exactly again. So we have this very short turnover with Mercury basically sitting on top of the true node, and going back and forth over it in its stationing of moving direct. So I anticipate, because this is happening on the equinox and it's sitting right on the north node of the moon down here in Pisces, as you can see, that things are going to, it's like right now as it's retrograde, it's like all of the horses at the race, think about like the Kentucky Derby or whatever, all the horses are penned in and they're getting all revved up. Or if you want to think about it like a race, everything is, they're all revving the engines. And as soon as the gun goes off, the flag goes down, right? It's just out the gate. And I suspect that at a soul level, we're going to feel that at the equinox, which is not far from now, right? This is Friday. So think about what's going on for you this weekend. And maybe it's been planned for a long time. Maybe there's something that is happening that is going to have a really huge impact on your life moving forward. And, it's not an accident that it's happening at this time. So Mercury stations direct at the equinox. And so right now, I feel like the engines are revving, even if it's at the soul level, right? And so maybe on the surface right now, things are feeling very still, very quiet. You feel like your analytical mind is kind of like taking a back seat. Maybe you just don't have the energy. You're going through the motions. This equinox, and that especially because Saturn and Neptune were Saturn and Neptune, yes, just had this conjunction during the eclipse window at 0 degrees Aries, which is the vernal equinox. I mean, the sun coming here, it's just going to be like, right? It's going to be very bright. And, we're going to kind of just like rise up out of like the formless ocean and have a sense of like, oh, this is where I'm projecting, this is who I am and how I'm projecting myself into the world. And then you have Mercury stationing direct right on the North Node at the same time. That's going to be like, bam, out the gate, right? So it may not be action as much as a projection from like the soul level, since we are talking about the North Node, which is where Mercury is stationing direct, essentially, right? And the Sabian symbol of the North Node is the jockey spurring his horse forward, right? He is like, all right, let's go. We're going to win this race, right? We're going to mobilize our energies. So things might have felt stagnant, or you may have been kind of very introspective or, kind of holding back and really considering some things. But by this point, there'll be decisions that are made or negotiations that will be agreed upon, something at that level that is going to propel the soul forward, as far as I can tell. So that's the equinox on the 20th. Now, Mars does trine Jupiter. Mars in Pisces does have a trine over to Jupiter right after that on the 21st. And, this is a very powerful type of flow. It's very harmonious, and it's a flow of intuitive, empathic energy, and with Mars in Pisces and Jupiter now direct in Cancer. So it's very ideal for creative pursuits. Maybe there's emotional healing that is on the menu for you, right? That this is going to trigger, and taking compassionate action with Mars in Pisces. However, this degree of 16 degrees Pisces, again, is about finding that stillness and that quiet within yourself. In the quiet of his study, a creative individual experiences a flow of inspiration. Now, Mars has the drive to act, no matter where, right? And so to experience things in terms of what Mars represents is a little tricky, right? But it's in that process, if the warrior can find that inspiration, can find that stillness, and knowing when to act is just as important as acting at all. So this type of trine is very powerful. It's very harmonious, but it also represents, I think, this moment, again, of trying to find that stillness within ourselves and knowing that that's what we're going to be acting on. And with Jupiter, it just enhances this. It enhances our expansion into this new territory, whatever it is for us, right? That we integrating our personality, that we're studying the mandala of our life and putting ourselves, integrating ourselves into that process. And so, it's really easy to get caught up in the, just do and do and do with Mars. But in this particular degree of Pisces, what we're being tasked with, I feel like, and what will support us the most with this trine to Jupiter is to find that quiet, subjective strength. And that will give us I think, the information and the intuitive hits that we need in order to integrate ourselves into the whole that we find ourselves a part of, right? Especially if it's been changing or it's now just starting to surface. That's the other thing. It may be something that you have intuitively known about or had an impression of, or something that's been, swirling around in your subconscious. It's going to start coming up to the surface. And something like this is going to really support us being able to really tap into that as it starts to surface. And of course, right after that, on the 22nd, the sun is going to conjunct Neptune after the equinox. And this is also one of those moments where there's action through imagination. It's like spiritual warriorhood, right? Acting with courage and compassion. There's also a need here, I would say, to really ground yourself and guard against any type of escapism, right? And make sure you're rooted in reality than mere fantasy. And that comes from just the fact that Sun and Neptune conjunct can certainly make us more idealistic and kind of engage in that escapism of Neptune, because it's so watery, it's so smoke and mirrors, right? It's such an illusory world with Neptune, because you have to really just suspend yourself. But the degree that they're going to be conjunct is a comedian reveals human nature. So this is always a difficult moment to have yourself mirrored back, right? And the humor is what disarms what otherwise would be a very uncomfortable experience. So this transit really invites us to align our personal ambitions, right, which is the sun in Aries, with a higher purpose. And I also feel like that is another big theme of what we're going to talk about once we get to the first quarter moon and beyond, because there is, especially with Pluto, and we'll get to it, I just want to, put a pin in this about aligning your personal ambitions with higher purpose, something that's transpersonal, right? Urging you to act on your dreams, though it requires awareness of confusion, escapism, self-deception, right? This is why grounding is really important rather than, getting caught up in escapism. And, it's one thing to look in the mirror and see the humor in all of it, but it's another to really embrace the objective view of ourselves and what is our higher purpose. So that's coming too. So we have the equinox, we have Mercury stationing direct, we have a new moon in a sextile to Uranus, as I've already explained, and then the weekend, as we're getting pummeled with all of this solar weather, Mars trine Jupiter, and the sun and Neptune will come into a conjunction. So again, there's going to be a lot of this kind of like spiritual overlay of potential self-reinvention, right? Visionary action, potential self-reinvention, and a need to really tap into the inspiration of our own, of spirit, speaking through us or giving us the insight that we are looking for. Action through imagination rather than pushing forward blindly. This is great energy to clarify what you truly want, right? And then acting with courage and compassion and not getting caught up in escapism. So there may be something that you've been kind of in fantasy land about that is going to reveal the objective nature of that. And this is a great opportunity to be real with ourselves, be very grounded, and still act with courage as long as we are, as I said, clarified with what we really want to create. And so that might be there might be a difficulty in seeing that reflected back to us and being like, oh, that's nothing like what I thought I wanted, or I've been in la la land about this whole thing and not really engaged in reality. And so that also is part of this weekend. So there's a lot of clarifying, right? And again, this goes along with you have to have the opposing position in order to truly understand anything, right? And that Uranus it's just not easy, right? With Uranus, there's no ease with Uranus unless you are someone who loves chaos, right? And if you're an Aquarian person, the ease comes from the fact that you're just aligned and resonating with whatever is happening around you, and that can go very badly, or it could be an amazing attribute. It really just depends on other aspects that you're working with. And then right after that, the direct Mercury meets the North Node, again direct. And right on top of it. So now I want to show you, so you can see that there, everything is kind of, in this bowl formation, it's all kind of cluttered together here for the most part. So now what I want to do is show you the chart for the 25th of March, because this is our first quarter moon. Okay, let me make sure you can see it. Yes, this is our first quarter moon. Now, again, this is a different chart because the ascendant or the rising sign is different, because it's a different day, different time, same location. So if you're a Cancer rising person, you get your own little horoscope here. And guess what? That's where the moon is for the first quarter moon. It's in Cancer. So lucky you, Cancers, right? You're really going to feel this. So before we get into the square itself, which is always a crisis of action, what do I do now, right? Because the first week, we're just kind of getting involved with the stirrings of the seed, right? Everything happening when the seed is starting to percolate and move around, and the enzymes are waking up, and things start to like germinate. And the first quarter moon is like, oh, this is the first real challenge that I've had to face with this new moon intention. What are the obstacles? Crisis in action, right? What do I do? And then from there, as we go through the waxing gibbous phase, it's really where you're like, well, I know what to do now. And in fact, I'm going to get out ahead of it. So that's what's going to be happening from the 25th up to the 1st. Now, not only do we have a sun in a square to a Cancer moon, which is going to be exceptionally difficult just because the moon in Cancer has us being very sensitive, very deep, very moody, very all of those things, right? Especially if you're a Cancer person. You might even feel this in terms of who you are, right? Your identity. Not only are we going to have that square, but the sun is going to sextile Pluto, and it's going to conjunct Saturn in Aries. So I want to point these two things out because they're going to be a reckoning moment with Sun conjunct Saturn at 5 degrees Aries. Now, the degree of 5 degrees Aries in Sabian symbol language is a triangle with wings, right? The capacity for self-transcending that we all have, right? That we are ourselves, but we have the capacity to transcend the self. And it's presented to us very early on in the zodiac. I think that's really interesting. So now when the sun and Saturn meet, I want you to consider that the sun is exalted and powerful in Aries, and Saturn is weak in Aries. It wants to be in Libra. So Saturn, when it's weak, will oftentimes overcompensate or present opportunities to overcompensate for its weakness, because Saturn is strong, it's powerful, it represents power in and of itself, right? The infrastructure of reality, right? The Matrix. And the sun is very happy in Aries and exalted. So keep that in mind as these two come together, because this is a reckoning between those ego-driven desires that the sun in Aries represents and disciplined reality within that sign. So this transit really demands responsibility, a certain amount of grit, structural changes to leadership, agency, and personal projects, often highlighting the need for patience, okay? Now, what I'm really feeling from this is there's going to be an about face. There's going to be an about face in terms of what our desires, our ego-driven desires are, and it's going to, there are going to be structural changes to leadership. It's going to demand a sense of responsibility that we may not necessarily want, and it will likely feel very restrictive, but it's aimed at building lasting, solid foundations, right? Especially in areas where we might have been too impulsive or lacked structure. So that's the thing about Saturn. It will provide a structure where there normally isn't one, which is in Aries, right? I mean, you're talking about cardinal fire, right? There's no structure to the momentum of fire. It just goes, right? So with Saturn here, it's going to give a container to that. And it's going to be hard, I think. It's going to demand these structural changes to leadership and to personal projects. And it's going to highlight the need for patience, okay? So you have that. You also have the moon squaring this at the same time, which the moon at actually be 5 to 6 degrees Cancer and 5 to 6 degrees of Aries, where the sun is. The moon in Cancer is like, hey, I'm going to be feathering my nest, right? I'm going to be nesting. I'm like building up the, excuse me, building up the, the nest where I'm going to be growing and nurturing that which I care about, right? The birds feathering their nests. They're preparing for the eventual creation and nurturing of the next generation, right? So that in itself, I mean, I can already feel it with the moon in Cancer. It's just like, you know what? I'm just going to totally like focus on home right now in the places where I feel safe and secure, and I'm going to put my energy there. Whereas this Sun and Saturn conjunction is going to be like, yeah, that's great, but you have to, there are big changes coming that are going to force a reckoning between what it is that you want ego-wise and what disciplined reality needs to happen. Now, on top of that, now this is going to be something that's ongoing, right? And I want you to also put a pin in this as we go through here because it's 11:11. Because this position of where Pluto is now in Aquarius is something that is going to have longer term effects throughout the, at least throughout the next season or two. And 6 degrees Aquarius is a masked figure, performs ritualistic acts in a mystery play. And the idea here is don't get too caught up on the imagery of like eyes wide shut or whatever. It's more about transpersonal responsibility. It's more about how we put on the mask of the particular, of something else, someone else, and we take responsibility for a role that is not necessarily us or our ego. So go back to those ego-driven desires, conjunct Saturn, right? Now Sun is in a sextile to Pluto at this degree and also squaring the moon in Cancer. This is not going to be easy. And this, again, the 25th, so this is next week. 6 degrees Aries, a square with one of its sides brightly illumined. The emotional desire for concrete. Oh my God, I'm getting so much in the heart right now. The emotional desire for concrete and stabilized existence as a person, right? And then the sextile to Pluto, which is a favorable connection. It's not a square, it's not an opposition, there's no tension here. But what this is saying to me is that it's in that emotional desire for stabilization that we are able to really tap into this raw transformative power of Pluto. So it is something that fosters very intense personal transformation. It heightens our willpower and strategic action. I think that's really, really important to consider, strategic action. This transit encourages using deep inner strength to make positive changes, boosting charisma, bringing opportunities for restructuring personal power or social dynamics with ease and purpose. It offers a big break, basically, if you're willing to face inner truths and take bold, necessary steps forward. Now, does it mean that moon in Cancer is something that we should avoid, feeling into? It's going to be inevitable, right? We're going to feel like I need to clean my house and prepare for what's coming new. And I feel like that there's no resolving a square, no matter what the square is, right? And especially a moon-sun square, right? You're just going to feel the tension between how you feel on the inside and how that's at cross purposes for how you express yourself on the outside, right? And so all of this is happening on the same day, which is the 25th of March. And then right after that is when Venus in Aries meets Chiron. Talk about like a salve for a a wound, which is really interesting. It's almost like cauterization, if that makes sense. Oh, I never even thought about that, but I'm getting like a really strong third eye thing right now about that. So Venus and Chiron coming to conjunction. They are in a conjunction at the Andromeda galaxy. So that's another starseed activation that's very specific to the Andromeda galaxy. Not the constellation and the stars in the constellation, but the whole galaxy, which is a whole different breed of being entirely. And if you have Andromeda galaxy, which is 25, 26, 27 Aries in your chart, then you'll know what I'm talking about here. So you have this really intense set of transits with the sun with Saturn, the sun with Pluto, with the moon in Cancer, and then right after that, Venus and Chiron come into this conjunction. And, it says it triggers deep relational, this is my notes, triggers deep relational wounds related to self-worth, rejection, vulnerability, all of those Aries themes. It highlights insecurities, in love, demanding a confrontation with past heartbreaks, or fear of not being chosen, right? We're talking about all these Aries themes about validity of self. And then you have Venus, which is about meaning and value and how we feel in our senses, right? It encourages healing by asserting personal boundaries and fostering self-compassion. But I can't get past now this image of cauterizing a wound with Venus and Chiron in Aries, right? We can keep things open-ended forever and just keep coming back to them and coming back to them. We need to really just narrow what it is we're focusing on. And sometimes we just need to cauterize that wound. And I'm getting a real strong hit on this, especially with all of the energy right before it with the sun and Saturn and Pluto, okay? So the 26th is when Venus and Chiron come into that conjunction. Now, here is the grand finale of all of this. Besides the fact that Venus will then move into her home territory of Taurus, thank you. And remember what I said about Venus in the last 10 degrees or the last decan of Aries. It's that Four of Wands. There is a completion. There is a circle coming to completion, which is kind of like cauterizing a wound, right? It is completing the circle. It is coming all the way back around, and there is a sense of completion and celebration as well. Chiron is not exactly easy for any of us. But these two coming together has a real potential to do some serious healing. I think healing in a way that can be very painful, but necessary. However, the finale here, in my opinion, is on the 28th, which is when Saturn and Pluto come into an exact sextile. Now, normally when these larger planets come into these aspects, because they retrograde for so long throughout the year, they tend to go back and forth in these major aspects. This is not the case with these two. This is a one-off, which makes it even more potent and special, okay? So Saturn in a sextile to Pluto. Now remember where the sun was in a sextile to Pluto, which was that, you have a square and one side is really lit up, and the idea of this emotional desire for stability as a person. So Saturn is here in a sextile to Pluto that's like, the transpersonal responsibility of, the masked figure, right? So when these two are in a sextile, Saturn, right, the father time, and Pluto, which is the lord of death, death and rebirth, transformation. When they're in a sextile, it marks a phase of transformation, but it's very disciplined, right? It follows a form. If you've ever been involved with martial arts in any way, right? Either fighting styles or even like Tai Chi, Qigong, or any type of healing modalities, like I've, practiced Shiatsu, the Eastern ways always have a form. And then you make corrections or you deviate or improvise within that form. This is kind of the image I'm getting right now. Disciplined transformation. There's a form here that then Pluto is going to act within. This aspect blends personal ambition with systemic change. Of course, with Pluto and Aquarius, definitely systemic change. Now, if you want to broaden that perspective of Pluto at 6 degrees Aquarius with society and everything that is happening right now, societally, is about a transpersonal progression, or, humanity is kind of wearing the mask of what needs to happen in order to fulfill this transpersonal responsibility. That's one way to look at it. And that certainly can pull you out of the fear and anger mode if you are in it. So it enables practical execution, so there's the Saturn aspect, of new technological, social, structural reforms, bringing operational plumbing to visionary ideas. This is big. Like I said, this is a one-off. These two are not going to come back into this sextile because of a retrograde. So we get this one chance here, and then we move on. So this transit provides a stabilizing force, facilitating the implementation of long-term changes that reshape societal structures and personal authority. Now, I'm not saying it's necessarily a good thing. It just depends what that operational plumbing actually is. Right? I think it's definitely worth considering the rapid introduction, the rapid inclusion of AI into our society and how we do things, right? So that's something that should definitely be considered in terms of a larger term thing here. But this ultimately discipline transformation, personal ambition with systemic change, right? There's a real opportunity here to get this operational plumbing to our visionary ideas. So knowing where Saturn is in your chart right now, knowing where Pluto is at in your chart right now, how that is aspected by other things in your chart can be really, really helpful. And then right after that, Venus comes into her home territory of Taurus on the 30th, and then we have our Libra full moon on the 1st of April. So I hope you got some insight what to expect here with this temporal map. Of course, a little bit of the space weather. So the next couple days, it's going to be very elevated in terms of geomagnetic unrest and all of the things that go along with that. So be prepared. Make sure that you are taking care of yourself, drinking plenty of water, getting plenty of rest, minimizing unnecessary stress. Like, there's no avoiding stress in our lives, but don't give yourself over to things that really just don't need your attention or energy. And that means getting off social media. If that means limiting your exposure to certain situations or people right now, it might not be a terrible thing to just take the weekend off if you can. Some things you can't get away from, and maybe those are the things that do need your attention. It's possible. But just know that, through the course of the next month, it's going to be the rapid upheaval of Uranus that is going to provide the alternative perspectives or the other side of something in order to sharpen the accuracy of our judgment. So knowing that as things differentiate into different colors, into different frequencies, into different wavelengths, that we know that it's all coming from the same source, and that differentiation is inevitable. And that's how we actually learn, and how we develop a synthesized perspective of our reality, right? We understand through that ability to have a mature perspective, to take into consideration the opposition of what it is that we're working with. So I look forward to checking in with you by the end of this month. Certainly we will come back together on the full moon or before it for the full moon forecast. We'll be checking in then to see how things have gone, right? And see how our purpose has clarified and been illuminated for us. I'm glad we're out of the eclipse window. That was exhausting. I'm really looking forward to things being less exhausting. I don't know if that's possible, but when you're doing this deep soul work and humanity as a whole is going through it, it just feels like you're carrying the weight of everything sometimes. And some of us really are, that's just kind of, what we're calibrated to do. So please take very good care of yourself this weekend. If you can, do what you can to take care of yourself. I will be doing the reading for the Catalyst membership this weekend. If you're interested in Catalyst membership and having a dedicated discount code for anything in my store to get the intuitive readings like I did on the last reading, the vibe check reading, if you haven't checked that out, that's the last video on the channel that before this one. If you want to get those types of readings twice a month as an addendum or a supplement to these new and full moon forecasts, you may want to consider Catalyst membership. It's in the description box below to get more information. And if you are a premium member, then you get your own personal reading every month or so. And it's just amazing how things are overlapping and weaving together for various people that live in different places, who are dealing with different challenges in their lives, and how it all is this beautiful tapestry. So if you want to be part of that container, you can sign up, and there are different price options. There's certainly no obligation. You sign up, you don't like it, you cancel it. That's it. The end, You just got to remember to do it if that's the case. So I hope everyone is doing as well as they can, taking very good care of themselves. Take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. All right, guys, I'll see you on the next video. Full moon in Libra on April 1st. Until then, it's been a pleasure. I'll see you later.